Welcome back, Red Spotters. I'm the Red Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Alexis J. Soto, joined by Mr. Kyle Lira, the host of the Fancy Fair podcast and creator of the Red Spotlight Network. Hi, Kyle. How are you doing?
Don't you forget it, bitch.
Great. And I'm also here joined by Ms. Alexis Moreno, the world's #1 Lin-Manuel Miranda shill. How are you doing today?
Good. Hi.
Great. Hi. That's great to hear from you. Great to see you. I'm happy to see you guys again. I had such a fun time getting to record an episode of Red Spotlight with you guys last week, which was the first time in a long time. And I don't know if you went back and heard a little bit of it. I thought it was very good. Overall, a great balanced discussion on all, hitting on the main points. But as always, there are things that are, always left to be said, things that we didn't get to or we want to, reevaluate. So, as I mentioned to Kyle and Alexis, Red Spotlight number 332 might as well be named Discourse, the episode, the musical, the podcast, or whatever we want to call it at this point, because a lot of the things that we will be discussing, and this is going to be less of a structured episode and more so of a free-flowing discussion. We're just going to go where the wind takes us, so expect side tangents, of course. But a lot of the main things that I had shared with both of you that we want to touch on happen to involve discourse, a lot of online chatter, a lot of varying points of view when it comes to... Well, actually, it hits on Marvel, it hits on Pixar, it also hit, obviously, In the Heights, and then some serious issues as well when it comes to how women are portrayed in films, queer readings, where Happy Pride, June month, or Pride month in June. Juneteenth also happened. June month, yeah. Well, yeah. June.
I didn't know that it was a month. I thought June was a week.
Happy June month. No, Happy Pride. Also, Juneteenth happened. So a lot of things are flying around, like a million miles an hour. And we're just want to use this show to kind of catch our breath and see how we feel about these things. I think a lot of us have some strong feelings, especially since I can definitely sense a commonality between the three of us, a little bit annoyed with a lot of the different takes that are being had. And I don't know if it's just the fact that we've been locked indoors for 15 months, but now since movies are back and we're getting more media, everybody seems to have an opinion on everything, it seems like. And so it seems like we're just going on an ever-ending cycle.
I think what it is I think it's a horrible case of needs to go outside-itis.
It's hot outside.
Today was the first day the sun wasn't really out. It was still hot, but I think tomorrow monsoon season starts. So it was kind of cloudy today, but it wasn't as hot. It was in the 90s today, so it wasn't too bad, but
it was overcast over here as well.
Strangely enough, yeah, that's not how we expected it to be.
But back to the whole thing, hey, it didn't stop the residents of Washington Heights, no matter how hot it was, all you need is some piragua, and call it some good, call it good. Yeah.
Well, apparently if you saw In the Heights, a lot of them stayed indoors because you didn't see them from what we hear, apparently.
Yep.
Before we get into that, I want to remind people, of course, of our ongoing Loki series with David Francisco. We're going to be recording an episode tomorrow on episode 3 of the Loki series, and it is really good and so much fun so far. I'm a sucker for anything when it comes to time travel, whether it comes in the past or in the future. So, and Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson are eating up or chewing up the scenery so much. It's so much fun.
There was some discourse.
Oh, really?
Positive discourse. Come 3 years ago, where a lot of people were like, Tom Hiddleston might not be Loki for very much longer. Why not he be Doctor Who? And then lo and behold, here we have him kind of being the Doctor, and his companion is Owen Wilson. So I think
it's something I don't think any of us foresaw, really, when it came to it. But I think that's actually a pretty interesting observation. He technically is operating as a time agent, so it's a lot of fun.
A Time Lord.
Yeah. So yeah, you can catch our recaps that drop on Thursdays here on Red Spotlight, and then our main shows will drop on Sundays. This one, I assume, I think I'm going to drop maybe this and another episode I have planned, unless it gets canceled. We'll see. Peter can be a bit prickly sometimes. He just came back from Hawaii, or is on the way back from Hawaii. I don't know.
Oh, nice.
I know. Yeah.
Wow.
Can you believe that? He just left for Hawaii. He didn't tell us.
I don't know if anybody could hear the sarcasm in my voice when I say, oh, how nice. But there we are.
Yes. And I'm hoping that when we do get to have a show with him, that we can talk about Luca and then also In the Heights with him as well. I am expecting some very interesting Peter Martinez reactions, as he only could. So, and of course, I get to share the episode with him there, so that should be fun. And of course, plenty of Luca coverage. Alexis and Kyle will have their review on the Fantasy Fair podcast. And if you want more Disney stuff, they just had, and we had a review for Cruella, as well as Avengers Campus last week. So check those out on the Fantasy Fair podcast feed. What days do you drop, Kyle?
Oh shit! I didn't upload it.
I was gonna ask you. What days? Are Mondays, Fridays, or
okay, Monday? Okay, either Magical Monday or Fantasy Fridays. Either which one, or in case I don't upload it, then sometime within the
I was wondering what happened to it.
Busy.
Because we did an episode on the Fantasy.
Yeah, it just been like I was like,
it's okay.
Wait a minute,
seems about right.
Something ain't right.
Seems on brand.
For the way that this year is going in terms of like Fantasy Fair content, like might as well.
Hey, listen, look, schedules are a tough thing. And I think, no, literally. And coming out of the pandemic, it seems like, especially these first couple months of 2021, we've been very busy. And the fact that we're still able to come together and have any kind of recordings whatsoever, I think is a miracle in and of itself. And yeah. So be on the lookout for those episodes to drop, and can't wait to hear them myself. Okay.
Honestly, last year, in terms of like pandemic, like this is the only social interaction I would ever have.
I mean, yeah. I mean, basically.
So it was nice.
I mean, the conversations that we would have with each other, especially last year, were, I think, the only like stimulating conversations. The ones that are actually like fun to have, not the mundane and boring ones. Like, oh, how's this person, or where are you going, or they look. So like this was actually a lot to look forward to.
You're wearing your mask.
I know. But you know what? Since you mentioned it, this may be actually an interesting place to start off with. How have you guys adjusted so far with where we are with the pandemic and everything? Because it seems like, as far as California is concerned, but for most of the U.S., with some exceptions. Most adults are vaccinated, and there is this, I think for the first time, at least in the way I feel things, a realistic sense that we've begun to turn the corner on this. As more and more are vaccinated, the ones who end up in the hospital are kind of the crazies that don't want to get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I keep seeing, right? So like, as far as it kind of an interesting role reversal where like I am vaccinated fully, and I can just basically be as I want to be out and about, and I'll be fine. But if you're somebody that does not want to have the vaccine, your risk is just as great, if not greater than it ever was, with this Delta variant out in some of these places that people are having a hard time being convinced to be vaccinated. So all that being said, and with, restrictions.
It's just as bad as Delta Airlines.
Oh my God. You had to. Okay. with restrictions being that was a Kyle joke. With restrictions being loosened everywhere, I want to ask you guys, how have you guys felt with these latest updates?
Go on.
I was just going to say, it's still a little bit like off-putting when you see people without masks, I think.
In public especially. I mean, in places where you're at the mall, you know, like, yeah.
It's a little bit weird. It's hard not to judge because we spent like a year and a half judging people who don't wear masks. So that, like, and not that like I would say it or anything, but like in my head, I'm just kind of like, and it just kind of like makes you think like, are you really, or like, are you lying? Like, you know what I mean? So that's been like, at least me, and like in my head, that's kind of been a little bit like what I have to kind of deal with. There was one day where I felt horrible. I felt so bad. But I went to Target without a mask because I went in my mom's car and I didn't take my purse or anything. And I didn't have an extra mask. I felt so awkward. It was so weird. But it was like a quick thing. But yeah, like I just like everybody who passed by me, I just like wanted to be like, I'm sorry.
But you weren't the only one, I assume, that wasn't wearing a mask.
I'm sorry. Pardon me.
No, I wasn't the only one, but still, like, I don't know. It just, like, in my head, I'm just like, like, if I judge people, like, what did they think of me? And I just, like, wanted to be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
We've now entered this new wave of self-consciousness with masks.
Yeah.
And I agree with you to an extent. Like, you know, it's like we've gotten so used to just everyone wearing them. To now see, like, some people, like, choose not to wear them is a little bit of an adjustment, you know?
Yeah.
And then another thing that I noticed with, like, my coworkers, too, is because it has been so hot, like, the masks it's hard. Like, especially, like, in where you guys are, or, like, over here, it's, like, freaking hell. And like, we were talking about it and we were like, it wasn't like this hard to like wear a mask last year. But also we were just like, we never left our house. So
yeah.
There wasn't anywhere to go. Everything was closed, you know?
So we were like, oh, well, yeah, that's kind of true.
Okay, so last Thursday, with my mom and my brothers, we went on a beach trip, just like spur of the moment. We were like, you know what? Fuck it. We're going to do it. You know, we've been inside for far too long. It's time to catch some sun. You know, so we went to the beach and all that stuff. My brothers, they fished off the pier because they're not really beachgoers and all that stuff. So they fished off the pier and all that stuff. And like, I felt like I was like, oh my God, I'm not wearing a mask, what the hell, and all that stuff. And I was just like searching my pockets for a mask, you know, to go to San Diego in the first place and all that stuff. And then after that, we decided to go to, like, you know, shop around for a little bit and all that stuff. Because it's San Diego, you know, they have stuff that we don't. And
a lot more stuff than we don't.
A lot. And so going into the stores, like, the masks weren't mandated at the stores, but seeing an employee with the mask on, I'm like, you know, okay, I'm gonna throw it on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw it on.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, that's how I kind of feel too. Like, if I go to a public place and the workers are still wearing a mask, I feel kind of weird about it. Like, when I went to Target, there was a lot of workers that weren't wearing a mask, because I assume it's like the same as Walmart, where like you have to show proof in order to like not wear a mask that you did get vaccinated and stuff. So like with the workers, it's a little bit different, because I feel like if they're not wearing one, like, I know that they are. But if they don't, like, with me at one of my jobs, like, I still have to wear one. Well, both of them, I have to wear one. So it's just kind of like weird, like, going into places and like they have to wear one. It's like, well, I should.
It's mask insecurity that I think will prevail for the next year or so.
Yeah.
because this year, like, we become, well, us, we become so accustomed to like wearing masks and all that stuff, and this whole like safety thing. I don't think that masks are gonna go away anytime soon. Like, in terms of like how some of the populace views masks, like because if you go and look at like Japan or China or overseas, they wear masks when they have just a simple fucking cold. So I think that will be the simple look around to it, because and also it's like it should be common health practice, wearing a mask. Because like during flu season, like, everybody's spreading that shit around. Like, we should have been wearing masks to begin with. This whole hyper individualistic America's freedom thing, I think, has really brainwashed a lot of people, and what's preventing a lot of like progress, and the reason why we're a year and a half into this whole mess. So but there are places that are like good, like, for example, the Foo Fighters just held their first maskless concert at the Madison Square Garden in New York. From what I hear, it kicked ass. A lot of people, they along with their ticket, they had like either like a picture or scan of their what's it called,
vaccine card,
the vaccine card, yeah, and they went in and like no problem. And so I'm like, okay, it's just gonna take some time. It's just gonna take some time to get used to.
We can't forget, whatever. We all kind of went through we all experienced a collective trauma. I mean, we did have over 500,000 people in this country die through COVID. That's not something I would hope we get over it like that. I know some people were like, I don't give a fuck. Didn't give a fuck when people died in the first place, a lot of them, but some of us actually do care. And so we shouldn't forget any of that. So, but you're right when you say, Kyle, that now there are some places where like, well, do I wear a mask here? Do I wear a mask there? Because some businesses still require them, and then some no longer do. So I think what you did is kind of how I approach it. If I see an employee wearing a mask, I put it on. I don't even think twice about it. Out of common courtesy, that's just what you do. When I go to public events,
unlike Moreno over here going in and Target mask.
That's so mean.
Oh my God. When I go and cover public events, masks are normally still the go-to, although also there was this one last week where no one was really, everyone from what I heard was vaccinated, so like no one was wearing a mask, and that was fine. Like for me, the only place that I don't really wear a mask is at work, because there are only like 5 people max there at once, and they're all vaccinated. And
must be nice.
Yeah, well, it's a small office. It's not a high maintenance like
small world after all.
I don't deal with the anxieties and pressures and stresses that you two deal with in your respective jobs.
Because I'm dealing with the public all the time.
Yeah.
And Moreno, she's dealing with the Arizona public, which is a completely different beast all in itself. There are multiple people I've had to tell, wear a mask, please. And we finally, after all this time, put a sign, mask required, up in the front of the store.
Oh, jeez.
Really? After the restrictions have been like lifted, now they decide, let's put up a mask. Didn't you call somebody a bitch for not having a mask on?
Yeah.
I really wish somebody would have recorded that. I would have wanted to see it.
She's like, the whole America's free bullshit and all that stuff. And I was like, too bad, bitch. I'm tired of this shit.
Yeah, I mean...
That's that's another conversation that I enjoy, that is now being more talked about, which is the whole idea of the customer being right. Dude, fuck that shit.
We need to end that, because it's enabled this eccentric entitledness that I don't think that we we need as a society.
Exactly.
And, maybe Joker was right. Maybe we do live in a society.
Also, like, people just, like, misunderstood, like, everything else in America, what that actually meant. Like, the customer is always right never actually meant, oh, yeah, whatever comes out of your mouth is correct. Fuck that. No, what it always meant was tell them whatever they need to hear for them to spend money at our store. That's what it always meant in actuality. Not that whatever.
Try telling Americans that.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole different side thing. But overall, it's an adjustment period as far as, like, for me when I have gatherings with family and family friends. I've been to several now, and I don't even really think much about it because, like, I feel honestly protected through the vaccine, and then most of the people that I'm with are vaccinated, so there's really little to risk, honestly, with me. I went to Universal Studios a few weeks ago, and it was like,
yeah,
I mean, it was fine.
Yeah. We'll see how it
So that's where we are.
continues.
So masks.
All right. So let's start off with In the Heights. So we obviously discussed last week all of the drama as well as the film. Before we get into the drama, there were some lingering thoughts about the movie. Kyle, I never thought to ask this of you, and maybe also David as well, because David doesn't speak Spanish, at least from what he tells me. He may understand some things, but maybe not like speak it, as well as Kyle. Was there ever any part in the Spanglish sections of the movie that threw you off? That were you at a loss at certain words? I never asked this of you.
No, porque
Don't try it, please.
No, not really, because like I got the context clues, and that's how it's been my whole entire life, because when my stepdad would talk to his mom, they would converse in Spanglish, and so. And it's the same way with Filipino culture as well. Every time my dad would talk to family and all that stuff, he would usually they have their own version. It's called Tagalish, which is a combination of Tagalog and English, and so like I would pick up context clues of what they were talking about to see, and if they really leaned into the Tagalog, if they really wanted to shit talk me, but. That's a completely
God.
That's a completely different ball game all in itself. Ooh. But no, I picked up the context.
What I did notice, in repeat listenings of the soundtrack, which is spectacular, just to say it 1,000 times over. But one of the common things that they did was they basically said a word in Spanish and they basically repeated it in English. Like they do that a lot. Like I think in the Benny song where he says "Atención." Attention, like immediately after. So yeah, they do that quite a bit. To me, I don't know, like it's not the kind of movie where I think anybody would get lost at, really. No.
I mean, it's meant for everybody. I mean, I think that that all cultures are kind of the same in terms of how a community is and all that stuff. So I'm pretty sure that, there are some universal languages in there, not just through language, but through way of life and all that stuff.
One of the things I also forgot to say, and David touched on it a little bit in his opening comments I heard back, about some of the different, visualistic decisions they made with the movie. What I'm referring to exactly is not just where Benny and Nina are basically
Benny and the Jets
are basically walking on the on the building. But then also in moments where let's say in 96,000, right, in the beginning moments of the number, with Ramos and Hawkins, they're like wrapping it out, and then there are like illustrations that come on the screen. Like I think one of them has there's a reference to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they have like a lightsaber or an illustration of a lightsaber there. And what I found fascinating, and it's sprinkled throughout the film. It's not just in that number. What I found really interesting about it is, it felt like either on the part of Chu or Miranda, them kind of pushing the boundaries of a musical in a live action setting, which I really liked. And it almost felt as if they were trying to emulate what they could from what works in an animated space in a live action space. Because we always talked about, and we always reference Howard Ashman and how he says like the animated genre is perhaps the best way to really execute a musical, or what the musical stylings are most at home with. And when I watched it back again a second time on HBO Max, which by the way, the film aged very well. It is such a good movie, and the music hit harder, the performances hit harder. It is honestly, now granted, perhaps I'm a bit more upset with the situation that happened with Luca, the theatrical experience anyway. But with what's happening here, so much is not being, like, with all of the side conversations that are very much valid and we have discussed, not enough is being asked what exactly went wrong with how this was just ignored across the board. Because in a normal time, pre-COVID, I feel like when I'm watching this movie, I am looking at a classic Hollywood hit that people would like go to the movies and watch.
People are not interested in classic Hollywood hits. They're looking for big blockbuster, rock'em sock'em bullshit here and there, with extra added lore.
That's true. That is all true. But then there are also other films that are not of that variety that do break out, like a Crazy Rich Asians, for example.
I think it's because it was such a cultural tentpole.
This should have been a cultural tentpole. That's the thing I'm trying to make,
But here's the thing,
though.
It was buried by discourse, though.
It was buried by discourse, but it was also buried, initially anyway, by how little interest is rated. And it's just, honestly, there are a lot of great observations that have been made for why this didn't work, and we've discussed them. My point, though, is, having seen it again, I just cannot believe this film that is so great, and I would imagine end up being one of the best movies of the year easily, is just now considered a massive failure.
Yeah. And it sucks because most of the people that I watch, like, who also talk about movies and stuff, like, say that this movie is great. And I blame Twitter.
It's just, this is where I think, like, the media really pollutes, and by extent, film Twitter as well, because, like, when you get something like In the Heights, and it doesn't matter what's on the surface level, whatever clickbaity article you have, like, oh, it didn't represent this group and all that stuff, everybody clings to it like little leeches and start to dilute the main intent of the piece. And so that it really doesn't help it with that case, so but yet I don't know, it could be other factors going in and all that stuff, but I think it's just film Twitter and clickbaity articles that really latch on to negative connotations. And to quote Jonathan Pryce in the movie Tomorrow Never Dies, here you go, this is my James Bond reference of the whole entire podcast: there is no news like bad news, and that is completely 100% true. What are you gonna read upon? What are you gonna cling more onto? Are you gonna cling more onto, oh, this old lady baked a bunch of cookies for, a bunch of firefighters? No, you're gonna read about the story that's the most negative thing because it sells.
Yeah, that's just how it works.
and it sells the most. I mean, you're in freaking journalism, you know that of all people. So the more negative, a story is, the more you're more likely to run with it, the more likely the mass populace is going to latch onto that. And, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, so.
I wonder, do you guys expect either West Side Story or Dear Evan Hansen to do better than In the Heights did?
Yes.
You don't think those films will get derailed by negative campaigns as well?
West Side Story.
Maybe West Side Story. Maybe Dear Evan Hansen, just because of what it is. But one,
go on.
Most likely is going to have an all-white cast. The other one is half white, whereas this one, not really. So
notice,
there's that.
But notice how the movies that are not getting representation are the ones that go out completely unscathed.
And that is
not
that I think is like the root of my problem.
Yeah, like you think like I love Steven Spielberg. I love the fact that he went and did a musical. But if there's a musical that perhaps should be criticized for its lack of representation in its casting, shouldn't it be West Side Story more so than In the Heights? Especially since, and then this is another issue with the movie, Ansel Elgort has become kind of a toxic presence, and he's basically the lead.
And not only that, but I am afraid that Rita Moreno's recent discussions and all that stuff, I'm pretty sure the media has already buried her.
Let's talk. Well, I'm not sure I agree with how the media is treated. I know some people perhaps, but overall, I think she kind of rebounded so far. Let's talk about that. We mentioned her comments, kind of in the show last week, although perhaps not to the full extent of it. So I did talk about last week how Rita Moreno had expressed, dissatisfaction with the criticism that Miranda was getting, as well as praising him for bringing, Latino-ness and Puerto Rican-ness to the United States in a big way as he had. What I did not mention, though, was part of her comments, and perhaps I should have, but we were really running for time at that point, was where she was saying she came off as very dismissive toward the people who were voicing these concerns, where she was saying that wait a while, why are you doing this now? Can you just wait a while before this happens? And I feel like I saw the clip, and I know a lot of people who saw the clip were also, she was very obviously dismissive. I don't believe that was her intent. Regardless if that wasn't her intent or not, it still came off as patronizing and dismissive, and she, I think, was correct to clarify and apologize for coming off that way. In my view, when I heard it, I didn't hear, oh, this bitch is obviously dismissing these people and their valid concerns. What I heard was somebody who was very much upset at all of this blowback for her friend, who she kind of considers to be a hero of hers, for bringing so much of this representation. Like, she's 89 years old. Like, her life's almost over. For most of her life, she could not see what Lin-Manuel has done. And so she obviously idolizes what Lin has done. So what I heard was somebody who quite honestly was upset that her friend was being attacked this way. And also, because of her background, who she is, really would have wanted, as all of us here would, for this film to be celebrated for the achievement in representation that it was able to be, And as we found it personally upsetting that it was completely obscured by this other thing, as valid as it is, I understood her frustration. Regardless of that, did it come off as dismissive? It did, and she was right to apologize for that. Although I don't think she was intending to be that way, but regardless of that, that's what it is. I don't believe any of us here last week were being dismissive whatsoever. We were just really frustrated. Not that I've heard anything, but, you know, just to repeat it once more, that as far as the overall discussion being had with issues of colorism, and in particular the erasure of Afro-Latino voices and faces, this is a positive conversation that people remember this for the next time, for the next, you know, creator that makes a film like this to remember to have this in mind. But there have been some pieces, and I don't know if you felt this way, that maybe it took it a bit too far, because it seemingly, there is this sense out there that some voices are predominantly more important than the others. And I don't know if you caught this, but I think it was yesterday the Washington Post put up this I don't know if it was an op-ed, but it was in response to all of what was going on with In the Heights. And one of the things that really upset me kind of immediately was this opinion piece. In the Heights is just more of the same whitewashed Hollywood. And while I get you see what I'm saying here? It's like, wait, what are you talking about? In the Heights is whitewash. And what my immediate response was, so now we've reached the point where casting brown actors is the same as casting white actors. I get the point. Overall, I think the person was making is that
I think that mentality in itself is very patronizing to those that actually are, you know, complexually darker. You know,
not right now because stayed home for a whole year, but I can get that way.
Yeah. So like it sounds very patronizing to those groups that that they're saying that should be more represented, because it's like, well, you're not, you know, you're not Mexican enough, you're not Latin enough, you're not, you know, and all that stuff, because there are different, I don't know if anybody knows this, but there are different shades of many ethnicities.
There are different shades of every race.
Literally every single race.
Right. And for reasons that still continue to mystify me, there are also...
And for white people, there's two colors. There's white or red.
Oh my... Okay, no. Okay, okay. I understand...
It's a joke.
I understand the point.
It's a joke, people.
But I understand that, you know, there's a problem with especially dark-skinned people, right, that are being erased from the screen. But to the Washington Post, back the fuck up. You know, there are just as many people out there that felt seen for the first time with this movie.
Yeah.
And saying that it is more whitewashing feels like an attempt to invalidate the people who did feel represented, which I don't like. And that's not good.
Again, going back, I feel like that is my issue with this whole conversation. It's just, I understand the frustration with people, but also, like, we have never seen anything like this. And again, why not just for a little bit, you know, celebrate this?
Instead, nobody feels like celebrating because of all this that happened, you know? So, I mean,
it's like... And you're kind of guilted not to, you know, celebrate, you know, because, like, if you do celebrate this movie, then you're a complete belligerent racist. I don't know.
It's quite
People need to go outside.
Yeah, I'm done.
It kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We can't have nice things.
I 100% agree with you. We indeed cannot have nice things.
So, I guess we're pivoting to something else here at this point. Anthony Mackie has been in the news. I don't know why this week of all weeks, but okay. He gave an interview, and he was asked a question about how a lot of shippers out there, fans that ship characters, really apply a queer reading to the Sam and Bucky characters. And then Anthony Mackie was asked about this. And his answer was, got a lot of hate, got a lot of blowback, and there were even a lot of people who were so hurt, they were like hurling around accusations of homophobia toward Anthony Mackie, which that doesn't sound right. So what did he actually say? So he said that so many things, and I think granted, the answer was a little bit awkward, so like we don't really know what he was getting at. So many things are twisted and convoluted. There are so many things that people latch onto with their own devices to make themselves relevant and rational. The idea of two guys being friends and loving each other in 2021 is a problem because of the exploitation of homosexuality. It used to be guys can be friends, we can hang out, and it was cool. You would always meet your friends at the bar, You can't do that anymore because something as pure and beautiful as homosexuality has been exploited by people who are trying to rationalize themselves. So something that's always been very important to me is showing a sensitive masculine figure. There's nothing more masculine than being a superhero and flying around and beating people up. But there's nothing more sensitive than having emotional conversations and a kindred spirit friendship with someone that you care about and love. Sam and Steve had a relationship where they admired, appreciated, and loved each other. Mackie continues, Bucky and Sam have a relationship where they learn how to accept, appreciate, and love each other. You'd call it a bromance, but it's literally just two guys who have each other's backs. I don't think he said anything wrong. I don't think intentionally here. There are some phrasings that
are weird.
It gets better the more you read it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because if you read that first part, you're like, wait, what is he saying here? What's he saying?
I'm pretty sure a lot of people dropped off the face on the earth and just like, fuck this guy. There was a interview piece with Mark Hamill at the Oxford Library, and he was like asking like, how do you perceive Luke now that he's older? And this is when he was doing press junkets for The Last Jedi, and this is when he was like, we
haven't done that in a while.
We haven't mentioned The Last Jedi in a while.
Yeah, but here we go. Hey, the Discourse episode, part dose, so might as well bring it up. So he was doing press junkets for The Last Jedi, and he was talking about, like, how does he perceive the character? And he said, to the vein of, perceive the character however you wish. He said that, if you view that Luke Skywalker is gay, of course he's gay, because that's your interpretation of the character. And Luke Skywalker, and Mark Hamill, when he looks at that character, he says that Luke Skywalker was never his character. He's just borrowing the face for a little bit, and whoever is making the movie or whoever is watching it, it's their character, and whatever they interpret the character to be. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you view Bucky and Sam to have this tumultuous like sexual tension, then by all means have that sexual tension. I have ships that never freaking
you've written
remotely sailed.
You've written about them extensively. You're a fellow shipper.
I will not reveal the titles of my works, but But I have indeed written fan fiction about ships that never sailed, and it's just that,
Mm-hmm.
So I get where a lot of people are upset at this because it devalues
their perspective.
Their perspective on how they view those characters,
I would
But
argue
also-
it shouldn't, though. It shouldn't make a difference what Anthony Mackie says, or quite frankly, what Mark Hamill says. I think what Mark was right, though. It's like, if that's the way you see it, and that's the way you see it. You shouldn't have to look to somebody else to validate your point of view. Like, I understand how, with some of these comments, and especially how Variety framed it initially, how people could be led to believe that Mackie was kind of offended that people would actually think that this was like the intention, which is why he wasn't, but it seemed that way from I think the first couple of sentences.
I think he was the deep root of the conversation of where he was coming at is like, why does everything have to be a romantic relationship?
Yeah.
Why does everything have to? Why can't people just be friends? And I think that's where he was coming from.
Yeah.
It didn't, the way he phrased it, not necessarily the case. And he didn't do himself any favors. But I'm pretty sure that that's where he was coming from. Why does everything have to be like romantic? Why does everything have to be sexual? Like, it doesn't matter what kind of, thing it has to be, and that's coming from a dirty-minded, in the gutter person myself. Not everything has to be a romantic connection. What's wrong with just being friends? So I get what that means, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't the first time Anthony Mackie has been asked that question, because I'm pretty sure it goes the roots of him being romantically tied with Steve Rogers or whatever character out there. I'm pretty sure he's asked every question under the sun, because press junkets, quite frankly, freaking suck. They all ask the same 5 cookie cutter questions. So I'm pretty sure he was frustrated. It's kind of like, remember when, okay, here's my second James Bond thing. Remember when Daniel Craig was doing press junkets for Spectre, and the interviewer asked him, would you do another James Bond movie again? And he said, I'd rather break this table and use the glass to slit my wrists. That's what, and that's pretty much like, I feel the kind of tension that was going on there as well with Anthony Mackie. So I don't know. Go ahead. It could go both ways.
It really could. But I think it also kind of introduces a separate conversation about queer readings, especially because, like, what I did notice is a lot of people, particularly from the LGBTQ community, were they were particularly frustrated because, as I think some of them are pointing out, they're so often queer baited, and there's very little stuff, in mainstream franchises that actually comes close to what they would like as far as like representation, to bring that back around. One person actually said here that caught my interest was, being gay means watching one painfully obvious gay allegory after another, and then being told by the creative team they don't know what you're talking about, but it's cute / misguided / oppressive / toxic that you choose to see it that way. Okay.
So Luca,
it's just, I feel, what I have to say about this is basically like, I can see why people are upset. I don't think that people should have taken it that far. But as I told Alexa
with
before,
Anthony Mackie,
we all know why they did.
With Anthony Mackie?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
We all know why they did. I do think that he needs to be a little bit more careful with what he has to say, unfortunately. But
he needs a PR coach, because I think earlier in the week he did say something about he wanted to include "Make America Great Again" in his Captain America speech in the last episode, in the monologue. Not because he's a Trump guy, but because he wanted to like do a spin on it. Mm-hmm. But it came off like
yeah.
Like Anthony Mackie is Anthony MAGA.
Anthony Mackie. But I don't know. I do think that he should have just been like, I do think that it's like not fair of him to basically put a stop to it.
Yeah, sure. It was a bit aggressive.
Yeah. I don't agree with that. Like, I think that, like, as somebody who's the face of this huge character, let people think what they think. You're about Captain. The character. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that, like, how he ended it in basically saying like, we're just friends, that's it, and like, let us be friends, basically. And the whole thing of like how he said, because I feel like it also kind of brings up this whole conversation about like toxic masculinity.
Yes, it does.
And guys can be sensitive too. Guys can have these deep conversations. Men can have these deep conversations. They don't have to always be punch, punch, kick, kick. Mm-hmm. And being friends with other guys is okay too.
Which Captain America from time to time has been painted as like the hyper masculinated friggin' figure of comics and whatever.
He's been painted by a lot of people who I don't think understand the character though, because he's one of the most sensitive characters.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you'll see like a lot of people take that and just like, yeah, that's a whole different thing all in and of itself, ultimately. But since we're on this, as Kyle brought it up, so Luca, so we're not going to do an official review of the movie, but
I guess you could say that transition went swimmingly.
Oh God, okay.
Sorry to go into deep water about that one.
Geez.
Damn. We're not going to get into a review of what we've thought of the movie overall, but inadvertently in this discussion, we may reveal at least partially what our feelings were about it. But it very much fits into this narrative because this film had its debut on Disney Plus this past weekend, and immediately the conversation ensued in different directions. But in particular, since we're on this thread with queer reading, many people feel very passionately about how, while not outwardly saying it at all in the movie, this feels a lot like Disney's first quote-unquote gay movie. And then others were like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not in here whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And then there was some infighting once more about like, well, why can't we see it this way? Because it's not there. And it's like, okay, well, all right. Again, it's this discussion of like, if people choose to view it that way, what is the problem?
Yeah.
Okay. I was watching this movie about a few hours ago. And there was a scene in the movie where an ensuing conflict happens between our characters. And the question that my brother brought up is, are they gay?
At what point did he bring this up? In the movie?
It was a conflict.
No, I mean, like, is it halfway through the movie? A little over halfway, or
halfway through the movie?
Gotcha. Okay.
And then so he's like, "Are they gay?" And I'm like, "Well." And this, and mind you, my brothers are not like me. They don't keep up with the news and all this stuff. I would tell them an interesting thing that would pop up here and there. But for the most part, they're not in the know-how of like news and all that stuff, of like the discourse and film Twitter and all that stuff. Like that's a completely foreign language to them. So just the fact that they were able to pick up on that was very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think overall, I'm very happy for a lot of people who feel seen by this movie. Obviously in a very different way than In the Heights made, people feel seen. Now, therein lies this other conversation about what overall was the intent. And I do believe, like clockwork, sometime over the weekend, the director did come out and say, well, this wasn't the particular gay reading of it. This wasn't intentional. Okay. There's that. Having seen the film, I believe when he says that wasn't the intent. I think I feel like overall what the film and what I really appreciated about it was almost a complete absence of this bullshit toxic masculinity that has been kind of a curse, for generation after generation.
Yeah.
It is, taking sexuality and identity. It may very well be there. But we're talking about in the context of two young boys, children, right? This was a very intimate, affectionate relationship. Sweet, but innocent in a childlike manner. It is, and maybe this is part of why your brother may have asked this question. It is different and unfortunately new.
Yeah.
That what the film offers is a friendship between two young boys, and they're very affectionate toward each other. They hug. They hug a lot, honestly. They're sensitive. And I love how that is not at all, at any point in the movie, discouraged or made fun of.
Rather encouraged.
Very much so. And how special is that? I think that ultimately is what kind of makes this film really special because, and I've seen this happen across on film Twitter, especially, but then other people who are not necessarily film aficionados who say, man, I really wish I would have had a movie like this when I was a kid.
Yeah. I do really, really appreciate this movie for that reason. People can read into it whatever they want, but I think ultimately the relationship that these two boys have and what on the surface it represents, like, I think it is so important, and it is so important for people to see this. It is so important for older generations to see this, and for especially younger generations to see this. For boys, men, grown-ass men, this is something that I think is such a problem with a lot of people. Like, I see it every day, like, at my house, And it may be intentional, it may be unintentional, but the toxic masculinity thing really gets my gears going.
Oh, it does.
It gets me so angry.
Yeah. I was, growing up, I was raised, to be a lover, not a fighter. I was raised to, be affectionate towards one another, to love one another, and all that stuff. And so I've never really, except for, when I catch glimpses of my dad displaying it, because his culture was completely different than my mom, who primarily raised me.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was very much raised in this machismo, kind of, old school environment in where he grew up at, so like you had the two conflicting things. Fortunately, I was primarily raised by my mom, so like I know what I'll reach in and give you a hug, and and all that stuff, and not think twice about it, so so I get two sides of the coin of where that is coming from. In terms of this movie being queer coded, but no shit. The whole movie feels like one gigantic kick your face and kick your teeth in allegory for the coming out and homosexuality in a very Disney way of discussing that, very sanitized Disney way of saying that. But yet again, like, this metaphor has been done before of like, oh, the whole monster allegory of like, see the world for who you really are kind of thing. I've seen that done before. But I really like how it is, the relationship between these two characters, between Luca and what's his name?
Alberto.
Alberto
Scorfano. That's an interesting name right there. Alberto Scorfano.
Translated scorpion fish. Fun fact.
Is that so?
Yeah, it is so.
Okay.
The character between these two is something really unique that I've never seen in a movie that's been like this. Supposed to be this big. And I would thoroughly, that's where I respected this movie, because they actually went there. I'll display more of my thoughts elsewhere, but in terms of like the queer codedness, no shit. And I like the fact that these two are like a fish out of water to fully display that kind of allegory together. Literally. So I don't know. I think that it needs to be said, it needs to be heard, especially because of the the theme of this month, which is Pride.
June.
You need
June month.
The June month. Hashtag. So yeah, in terms of where the creator is also coming from, the director of the film, he also pulled an Anthony Mackie, and he was like, they're just friends, bro, no homo, and I don't. Again, like, I see where he's coming from, like, like, it's completely platonic, but also it devalues the thoughts on other people as well. So, yeah.
I think part a part of what's really kind of helped cope with this whole, like, this not being in theater situation has been such a positive response from the film, as far as like actual people seeing it. This seemed to have gotten a really weird cold shoulder from the critics. I'll put it in that way. But as far as the reactions I've seen from normal people, it's been nothing but positive. There have been some that are like, well, it's good, but like, But there have actually been some, people who have been really passionate about this movie. I was looking forward to it a lot. And what was it? I kind of was really unprepared for, and I'll go into a little bit more detail here since I won't be talking about it with you guys on Fantasy Fair. But this kind of stole my heart in a way I wasn't expecting it to. Like, it was in my mind so much so that I kind of went back and saw it again, like the next day. Which is like, that's not something I do unless I really, really liked something. And like, I liked the movie the first time. I really loved what it stood for. I loved what it did. And then going back and watching it again, it's kind of been occupying my mind in a way that I hadn't expected it to. Again, we'll go into the film in much more detail in the subsequent reviews. But I don't know, like it's really kind of caught my imagination and my heart, really. And so I really wished I would have gotten the chance to have seen this in the big screen. Also, it's kind of the definition of a family movie. And the idea that this isn't right now in theaters where it could be helping theaters right now is so infuriating to me. This is the perfect movie that would bring families to go to. And then one other aspect that, well, actually, did someone want to mention something real quick before I say something else about Luca?
Nope.
Because there was something else about the film that is particularly unique. That I think it was David Doubt that pointed this out. I shared this with you over the weekend. And that is, Pixar's always made films that can be enjoyed by all ages, but the core themes tended to skew a bit mature for cartoons. Anxiety over aging, irrelevance, and death were so common as to be practically the mission statements for the studio. But Luca feels so much more accessible for kids. Luca is a story about kids aimed at an audience of kids. Not to say that it's in any way dumbed down. It absolutely has all the hallmarks of what makes Pixar movies special. It's just, I think for once, there is a subtext kids can actually engage with beyond the surface level story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I know you saw this. What's his name? Julian Hilliard, who we know from Haunting of Hill House. He was on WandaVision as the older, or as Billy Maximoff, and he was also in The Conjuring 3 this year. He turned 10 years old, and I saw him just this past weekend on Twitter. And he also tweeted that this was the perfect birthday movie for him. 10-year-old, kind of the best way to experience this film. So,
because it is a coming of age story, you know? I mean, come on. Yeah. Now, interesting how the person used surface in a movie about sea monsters. What? Moreno got it. Instead of surface level. No, okay, all right, you're completely over here. But anyway, I mean, it could be relatable with, I think everybody. I mean, that's what the thing with art that I think is so fascinating, and that's where, movies could transcend beyond, whatever flashy colors, you see before you, is the way that you read it, and art is very interpretive, either it's a story about friends or two people hiding their affection for one another. It doesn't matter what kind of thing you view it as. Like, that's the thing that I think that is really interesting, is that for example, if you go to a concert, one person could be singing a song that the band is playing or the musician is playing for a completely different reason than the other person is singing along to. So I don't know. I mean, that's what makes it, I think, very unique and special and worth the conversation with.
I want to say, the movie honestly has already kind of become so special for me. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a Pixar movie this much. And by the way, I kind of like most Pixar movies. Like, they're all pretty good to an extent, so that's kind of saying a lot. But there was something kind of special with me.
Even
like
Cars 2.
I think you're talking to the wrong person about that movie. David is the one that has a strong passion for Cars 2. No, but okay, look, because
that's right. Remind me again to fire him.
This is going to be a segue into. You cannot fire him. He's the only one that talks to me about the TV shows. So I'm going to rebut that. No, you can't do that. Now,
poor soul. I'm so sorry, David.
Oh, come on. As we transition from one discourse to the other about this overall narrative about the quality of Pixar, because that's also been happening as a response. Because some people have like decided Luca is like a failure and boring and whatever, and that now the discussion should be what happened to Pixar. Okay, backtracking a little bit. I almost
there's even sorry to sidestep, but there's also like conversation like it didn't make me cry, therefore it is not good.
It made me cry. What the fuck?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I don't want to say anything. I was shocked a lot of people weren't moved by it, because I was both times I watched them.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, like, in Pixar movies, I sad cry, and this one, I was so happy crying.
I know, right? I was like overjoyed for what happened. Look, I love the film. I have it as my lock screen on my phone. I ordered a poster of it, and what actually made it even more special for me was so I've been working for this paper now, and I've been actually writing reviews that have been publicized.
Well, yeah, you're part of the Chicago Tribune now.
Sure, yeah, no, not really. I have a friend, actually. You know what's weird? I have a friend from my program at American University that just got hired to work at the Chicago Tribune. She's from Wisconsin. So she just got hired and she moved to Chicago. So I was very happy. Her name is Sean Zay. She's a great person. I was very happy for her.
Frickin' yuppie.
Come on. But Luca was one of the films I got to write a review for. And I actually was not told that they were actually going to print it. So they print the back page. They printed the Luca review, and then on top of In the Heights review that I also did. And I wasn't expecting it. So when I picked up the paper today and I saw the back of it, and I think I almost teared up. Like, wait, what? And it's Luca, and it's like, what? I wasn't expecting. It was a huge surprise. I was like, wow. I'm looking at it right now, and I can't believe it. You know, it's so. The film has already become so special for me on top of what it already was. I should be crying. Like, what are you crying about?
I'm just so happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Aww. Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It really is. So, there is that. But to the segue, which was this conversation happening about what happened to Pixar. I find it really weird. Like, where was this conversation, I don't know, 5 years ago, when all they were releasing were sequels? Like, Pixar just released its third original movie in a row. When was the last time that happened? You know when the last time that happened? Is when they released Ratatouille, WALL-E, and Up. Was the last time they had 3 consecutive original films in a row. It's been a fucking long time since that happened.
They did
and
3?
Up came out what?
3 consecutive original films in a row. There were some
Onward, because now we have Onward, Soul.
I'm not Toy Story. What do you mean?
Don't worry, Kyle. I didn't forget about Onward.
My bad.
Ouch.
Onward feels like such a long time ago.
It feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
Because it was before the Dark Ages.
Before the Empire. Yeah, so, and I don't know, like, what's really frustrating is that there was a point where I kind of was, like, disenchanted with Pixar. And it was right before Toy Story 4 came out, and then after Incredibles 2 and Cars 3. That's where I don't think they're terrible movies, but again, like, considering what they usually give us, that was the period where I kind of like.
But see, I feel like that's also not fair because
look.
You loved Finding Dory and you loved Toy Story 4.
Yes.
So that's how many sequels? That's like 4 sequels. So like 2 out of 4 ain't bad.
Alexis, I wasn't gonna say the sequels are the problem. I'm not one of these people that says just because they were doing sequels means that they were going down in quality. I think some of the sequels were lackluster, but a lot of the sequels I really liked to loved. You're right. I do like Finding Dory. I really like. You've really turned me around on Monsters University, by the way. I really like that movie.
The plan is working.
Yeah. No. I really
Sidious.
I really respond to it, and of course, I love Toy Story 4. It's like I'm not one of these people that just says the sequels are bad because they should not have been made in the first place. I'm not that way whatsoever. It's just in particular, I didn't connect or like all that well Cars 3 or Incredibles 2 because those sequels felt very safe. You know, while they may have been good, they just felt safe and it just didn't feel like Pixar was doing anything new. And at that point, this is before Toy Story 4, so I didn't know how much I would like it. But in the lead up to that movie, I was dreading it because it felt like, oh no, they're really going to mess with Toy Story. Like, this is something that they should have just left alone after all, considering. Then again, I ended up loving the film, so for me, it didn't much matter at the end of the day. And even Peter says that was the best of the sequels. So when he says that, okay, there's something there. Because he's a very hard person to please when it comes to the sequels of... I know that's his opinion. We all have different opinions when it comes to the Pixar films and the Pixar sequels. I'm just trying to say...
not that we should hold Peter as the utmost authority on...
I wasn't. I was just saying he is the pickiest person here when it comes to that.
Yeah.
The most critical. That's what I was saying. I wasn't saying I wasn't out putting him up on a pedestal. God forbid. Come on. Do not get the wrong impression here.
It's hard to please that man.
You say that from personal experience?
No.
Okay. That's what he would say if he were here. Yeah. Anyway,
poor Lexi.
Oh God. Stop. Okay, no, we're not doing this. Look, I'm saying that right here, right now, I have fallen in love with Pixar again. I loved Toy Story 4. I really liked Onward. I really liked Soul, and I loved Luca. So I don't know what the fuck these bitches are talking about. I think Pixar is great. What do you guys think?
I agree. People are dumb. And it's also just very unfair for people to hold past projects to such a high standard and for them to continue to be do great or you're the fucking worst.
Yeah.
Like that's such...
I hate that mentality.
I do too. I fucking hate it. And also they're dumb because this movie is great.
I agree with you, Moreno, because the thing is that with, especially because this is an original property, you can't really hold it, to other original movie standards, unlike you would with a sequel. So I think that this movie, it's proven its salts with what it is as an original movie. And the way that, the story structure is and everything like that, it feels like something that Pixar's never done before. So in a way, it's kind of the most ambitious that they've done.
That is true. And I also feel like people were just they expect a certain thing out of a Pixar film. They expect every Pixar film, I feel, to be Soul or Coco, where it has to go over the top or high concept, or it has to speak almost exclusively to, I guess, adult sensibilities. I did know, and I definitely have gotten this impression that, look, I guess if you're a fan of Pixar and you have grown into adulthood, and maybe you don't have the same, sensibilities as you were as a kid, maybe you'll just look at this movie and you'll just say, that was fine. And I've seen a lot of that, honestly, which, I respect and I understand.
But
it was fine.
Again, these movies are not meant for you.
I know.
Yeah.
To be fair, though,
they're meant for children.
I mean, it kind of goes into, Disney or, Walt Disney Animation also. We grew up during the Renaissance era, which was, peak Disney.
Yes.
And now...
We kind of had it made.
Huh?
We kind of had it made.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then now we have this new era with Raya, Moana, Frozen, Tangled, where adults are kind of like, but these movies are fucking great. I don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, I'm too old for Disney. Like, that whole conversation also is kind of stupid.
Ugh, it is so tiring. It is so tiring. Like, man, how boring are you? Like, where's your childlike sense of wonder if that's how you choose to see the world? Also, side note, interesting, when you compare, like, Soul and Luca back to back, Soul felt like the movie that Pixar made almost exclusively for adults. And then here you have Luca, where it felt maybe almost exclusively for kids. So a little bit of diversity there, just to point that out. Not that you can't enjoy one or the other if like you're in a different subgroup, but just identifying all that.
And I don't think we've ever had a Pixar movie. Correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm pretty sure somebody will. I don't think we've ever had a Pixar movie that was, a predominantly kid cast that was aimed directly for kids.
No, I don't think so. Not like this. It's been a while. A lot of the films lately, Yeah, I agree with you.
Because like Toy Story, they're all adults. Even the toys are adults.
Onward, but they're like teenagers.
They're, teenagers dealing with the very adult concepts of grief and loss, which is very heavy-handed. Here, they want to ride a fucking scooter. That's the main, ambition of these characters, which is very, kid-like and, an ambition, so I don't know. I think that this movie did things that Pixar really doesn't really do, and I think it should be taken as that, And again, I think people really need to desperately go outside.
And it's also like, Luca is the 24th feature animated film by Pixar, and it's like, the idea that every movie they make immediately has to be compared to the best work they've done is like, okay, you've reached the point of ridiculousness. Not everything a studio makes is going to come close to reaching the heights of their best work. Like, that's an unrealistic expectation to have.
Imagine getting to your 24th film. You're going to do whatever the fuck you want.
Can you believe Pixar has 24 movies now?
It makes me feel old.
God damn. 24 movies. It's crazy to think.
That's as many films there are under the James Bond umbrella. There's number 3.
Wonderful. I don't know. I feel a lot better about Pixar today than I did a couple years ago. And not that I ever disliked it, but there was a period of where I was just a little disenchanted with it. And now I'm at a point where I really appreciate also now the diversity of stories they're telling a little bit more. So
especially now that it's under new management.
Pete Docter, I think, is having a terrific run, as he should have honestly gotten the reins to this a while back. But he's, I think, proving his worth here overall.
If he hasn't already with his tremendous filmography.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Scarlett Johansson, this is actually going to include a couple of different conversations. So, first and foremost, Black Widow is coming out, and there have been reactions to it on social media.
Maybe.
We'll touch on those in a minute. But Scarlett Johansson obviously is doing a press tour, and she at some point was asked about how her character, Natasha Romanoff, was portrayed in the earlier films, and because she felt very comfortable to say that, look, she wasn't very happy with how over-sexualized the character was in her debut, particularly in Iron Man 2. And I think she said her direct words were she was basically a piece of ass. What do you guys think?
She ain't wrong.
Nope. I mean, we've long been critical of how poorly utilized her debut. I mean, she was in that movie, in Iron Man 2. I think Peter at one point even said he hated that character in Iron Man 2 because she really wasn't a character. She was just there to be there. So I can definitely understand that, really. But it's also interesting because, like, obviously female characters, female heroines have long been sexualized, through the Hollywood machine. But what is interesting in the case of Natasha Romanoff is it seems like this is the character, maybe the only character that we've seen kind of an evolution in terms of how they've handled her. So we started off with Iron Man 2 with this, I guess, over-sexualized portrayal of her. And then we've moved all the way, through Endgame and now with getting her film Black Widow. And clearly, I think a shift in how they even put the camera on her is kind of positive change.
Mm-hmm.
And it also is a reminder of how much this still happened. I was speaking to Alexis a couple of days ago about how, some of the things that came out with, the allegations of abuse on the part of Joss Whedon on the set of Justice League was how, he threatened Gal Gadot's career. And then even the initial criticisms before these stories came out, long before these stories came out, when Justice League came out back in 2017, some of the initial criticisms, mostly from female critics, were how obviously Wonder Woman was put through a male gaze, being directed by Whedon, in that he would put the camera and shoot her where you could, I guess, see more up her skirt or more, into certain parts of her body than how Patty Jenkins would do that.
Yeah, that I don't like that. That I feel like that's why I'm kind of really excited to see the Black Widow movie because, one, long overdue, should have happened way sooner. Yeah. But also because I feel like they'll do it right, I guess. Like, she's a superhero and that is it. Like, it's not, she's a woman superhero. She's a, like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously it's important to also note that, but, like, not in, like, a pervy way. So hopefully that does happen.
Like Catwoman, right? Like that was with Halle Berry.
Oh no. But yeah, it's a good conversation to have and to note these things because it's been happening for so long, and it is not good.
No.
So yeah, and also, like, it's kind of hard with Black Widow to, like, have this conversation with because I feel like the only time that I at least saw kind of that little bit of a shift was in Endgame, and maybe possibly the Infinity War, where we got to see, like, her being sensitive and her, like, actually kind of create having this family. Yeah,
a little bit of it in Winter Soldier and Civil War. With her relationship with Steve.
Yeah, but it wasn't, like, as deep as it is with or in Endgame, but like between, or I don't remember what movie comes out, the order of the movies that came out.
I think Civil War is where we started seeing that major shift in her character.
Well, because she was more of a mother figure at that point, right? And her role in that film was keeping the family from splitting apart more than anything.
But that also I don't really enjoy. Because it kind of puts the whole, like, woman, mother type of thing.
Oh, okay.
But then even before that, there's also, I don't know, I just think that there's a lot of things that went wrong with Black Widow that shouldn't have been, or it was just kind of questionable to me on, like, why these decisions were made for her to be tackling. I think, like, my biggest issue is, I think it should have been handled a lot more differently. Is that whole thing that happened, I think it was in the one with the robot. What's his name?
Ultron.
I forgot his name. Where she basically says that she's a monster because she can't have kids. So I don't know. It's just her character.
But again, that is Joss Whedon.
Yeah. I don't know.
But that also shouldn't, I think, excuse Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige, has been overly praised for, his contributions to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I think, as Alexis has expressed here, and Peter has long expressed as well, issues with how she was characterized. Mm-hmm. And I think overall, where I would agree is that Feige very much allowed the directors to pretty much do that work for him, because he never seemed to make up his mind about what he wanted to do with her, especially. Where I come from is I really do enjoy what Joe and Anthony Russo did for her, and they kind of gave her, I think they created a role for her on the team that I really appreciated, as well as her really interpersonal relationships with Steve, and then also with Hawkeye. Again, I think maybe I like what I got out of Black Widow in the movies the most, because a lot of us have different issues. I really, from a creative standpoint, liked the ending that she had in Endgame, but Kyle and Peter don't. David also, I think, agrees with me here. I don't know where Alexis falls in the line about this, but Black Widow seems to be the one where we have different feelings overall about it.
Yeah.
Like, I like the creative decision overall with Black Widow as far as her ending is concerned, but I agree, I would have liked to have seen something of more of appreciation for her after that sacrifice that she made, So, but it's tricky.
But it's so hard to freaking look at that scene and be like, oh, it's just a carbon copy of the one in the movie before with Gamora. So it's such a huge freaking juxtaposition of ideals that they were trying to do with her. Like, on one hand, you did have like the more motherly figure and all that stuff, trying to prevent the team from splitting apart, which is, I guess, better than oh, I can't have babies, so I'm a monster.
That was dumb. I forgot about that.
I hate that one. Every time I think about it, I get so angry because I have such an issue with things
well, to be fair,
that come from that.
Yeah, but to be fair, it wasn't just Joss Whedon's, I guess, internalized sexism that got in the way of that. Like, that whole dynamic with Banner, Ruffalo, it didn't work, really, ultimately, which is why it was dropped. And they never came back to that.
Yeah, because it was back. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I wish that they would have done more with her, because I feel like the things that we got weren't the best. But I'm still excited for the movie. But I do wish that we would have gone this sooner. But I'm also kind of a little bit nervous on what we're going to see in the movie.
Regardless of what ultimately happens and how we feel, I'm pretty convinced that the biggest issue the movie is going to have is the fact that it is several years too late.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've been saying it for a long time. Like, why is this movie coming out now after the character died in Endgame? It's like, it feels like, wait, what's going on here? Well, it may, and maybe to Feige's credit here, it could very well be that his hands were tied, because an article came out last week in Collider kind of speculating as to what happened, really, with this Black Widow film. And I think they legitimately point to Ike Perlmutter, the person who was previously Feige's boss, the guy that had no faith in, female-led movies or female characters or female villains. He had no faith in black characters leading a movie, literally. And so he was done away with in terms of having any kind of creative involvement in the films. Bob Iger made that decision because Feige was like, this is bullshit. Perlmutter didn't want to pay Robert Downey Jr. to be in Civil War. He didn't want to make Civil War at all. So it's like, This guy is a pest, honestly. Just get a racist pest at that was getting in the way. And because this move was made, I want to say in 2016, or maybe it was late 2015, so many films at that point were already in development and filming that I think a very plausible scenario was there wasn't room to put one more movie in there. When really the Black Widow film that we're going to be getting a couple of weeks from now, we should have gotten probably the year after Civil War came out. Because it takes place after the events of Civil War.
Or sooner.
Or sooner. Yes, absolutely.
I think this movie should have been phase 1. Like, honestly, this should have been phase 1.
But girls, Kyle, they don't make money. You know, we can't greenlight projects with girls in them because then nobody will go and buy tickets to see it.
Brie Larson and Gal Gadot can beg to differ.
Of course. Although, depends on who you're talking to.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm not even putting them in the conversation because their voices don't matter. Yeah. As you know, as the dates get, pushed, from this movie and all that stuff, and the more that people are trying to hype it up and all that stuff, I'm less interested in the movie scope and I'm more interested in the TV scope of Marvel these days.
I think all of us are that way at this point, right?
I'm not excited for Black Widow at all because I will support it because this is the kind of movie that needs to be supported. But again, this movie should have been out ages ago, and the fact that it's just barely, being made. And not only that, I'm a little fatigued with creative decisions going forward with things. I don't know. But I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
I'm looking forward to it. I've always been looking forward to it because this is a movie I've been asking for years. So on that level, I want to see this film. And then I also just want to see this character get her moment. I also want Scarlett Johansson to get her moment here. Because even in Endgame, even though she had a big sacrifice, she ended up being overshadowed by Tony Stark. I mean, how can you not? Yeah. But there was that. So I want this character to have her moment. And I also, what I have been won over in the trailers is this hope that they went for a smaller scale film. And they're focusing more on character and more on this family unit. And hopefully we can get something that's closer to the kind of storytelling we've seen on the TV shows, on the Disney Plus side of things. That's what my ultimate hope for is here, really. And I was very worried. And even though initial reactions on social medias are inherently really positive when it comes to most films of this caliber, I myself was actually kind of surprised by certain voices with how taken they were with the film, because I kind of was expecting the worst out of this at the gate. And now I expect as the weeks to, as they fly by and as the film opens, of course, there will be some kind of inevitable pushback or criticism of some sort, and I'm sure it'll all be warranted to some extent, or maybe some of it won't be warranted, really. But I love this character. And I want the movie that she's in to do well. And I hope to, at the very least, walk away having enjoyed it and maybe even liking the film. And the reviews that I read, some of the reviews by some voices who I actually, there was some positive stuff actually that I read from certain critics that are usually very critical of Marvel stuff. So I am optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic about the film, although of course keeping those expectations in check. But I have to say, from my vantage point, from the films that we've gotten so far in 2021, and you guys apparently didn't see the best movies out of 2020. That's on you. But there were some great films in 2020. And I don't know. I think we're in a time right now that after a year where we didn't get anything, there have been some pretty great films that I'm just loving right now, one after the other. So I'm hoping this continues that train. Alexis, anything else to say on this?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of where we are. Did you guys know we have a new holiday? It's called Juneteenth now, a new federal holiday. You guys hear about that? And did you guys hear that apparently a lot of people are angry at that? Like, imagine being angry at a holiday.
Because the government would rather make a federal holiday than actually deal with the civilians that Juneteenth affects.
Yeah. Well, you see, that right there is the substantive criticism of this federal holiday. And that's one discussion to have. What I was alluding to was the crazies who are upset that we're commemorating a holiday to the end of slavery. Like, imagine, first of all, being angry at a new holiday. Okay. But also being angry at a holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in America. Like, really? That's the look you want to have? Like,
correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like it wasn't even June 19th, but it was actually 2 years after the fact?
I think you're right on the money there. You know, it is something a lot of people are not necessarily aware of. Like, originating in Galveston, Texas. It's been celebrated annually on June 19th. In various parts since 1866, which that's a year after the end of the Civil War. And technically speaking, 6 years after the original signing of the Emancipation Proclamation,
which was completely ignored in Texas.
Oh yeah, well, because they were kind of fighting. They were insurrectionists.
Yeah,
and yet here we are in 2021, in certain parts of the country
are still that way.
View them they are that way, but they view them as war heroes, not traitors, not insurrectionists, not revolutionaries, but war heroes, veterans. Okay. Did you hear anything, Alexis, from your orbit about Juneteenth or confusion or pushback to this?
Absolutely not. There was nothing.
Nobody cared?
No. It's just, I feel like it's so weird. Because I am in that sense of like, I want to see action rather than more of like, here, have this, calm down. And that's kind of how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know. Obviously, anything of this sort is a good thing. But yeah, like there needs to be more.
Yeah.
Well, obviously there needs to be more. Yeah. It was I agree. It did feel a bit patronizing to see elected officials pat themselves in the back and treating this as an actual accomplishment. That, I mean, I don't think anybody should actually, oh yeah, you passed a holiday, good for you. That's going to create, like, what did we get out of the whole last summer of Black Lives Matter? Oh, you got a new holiday. Okay.
It's,
great. I guess we're going to pack it in.
I saw this video of this guy being like, me walking into work on Juneteenth. And then it, like, turns the camera and it's, like, employees, but it's, what's it called? The kneeling down that they did last year?
Yeah.
With freaking, a circle of life playing in the background.
It's so funny how they'll do the pomp and circumstance, but there's more pomp and less circumstance with this instance. It's funny how the government will do everything but nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
It's crazy the leaps and bounds will do everything but nothing.
As opposed to the previous administration that was hell-bent on pretty much destroying everything and taking things away.
I respected that because I actually had a goal.
Did it, though? It just seemed pretty fucking random.
Destroy everything in their path. That's a goal.
Destroy TikTok.
Destroy TikTok. What a freaking goal.
That's right. Trump was trying to ban TikTok for a minute there, huh?
I'm trying to ban TikTok. Don't like it. Jesus Christ.
I do miss the jokes, though. Anyway.
A lot of people were like, it'll be nice to have a boring president.
It's too boring. Especially, and also, it's kind of enraging in its own way, so not as boring as you would imagine. Anyway, I think we're done. Do you have anything else to say or anything that you saw this week that you'd like to talk about or bring up for a discussion topic here? I'm at a loss.
What did I see this week? Other than Luca? I don't think so.
Do you watch movies anymore, Kyle?
Not really. Not
what
particularly. Happened? Because I enjoy my time sleeping. Sleeping is good.
Depression naps. That's where it's at.
Yeah. So if not sleeping, listening to podcasts and juicy internet details like H3 freaking with Steven Crowder, that shit was dope. So that's where my time is. But movies, I don't know. I just I've not been feeling motivated to watch movies. The only reason I watch movies anymore is so to talk about it on the podcast.
There's so many things or so many shows and movies that I want to watch, but I'll find a little bit of a time to watch them, but I just feel like my life is a little bit crazy right now that
you're just drained.
I am, and having to focus on something for 2.5 hours feels so tiring to me right now.
Yeah.
But I'm working on fixing that, so hopefully I'll get to watch everything I want to watch soon.
Okay. Well, with that being said, thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Kyle, for joining me this week. I appreciate your time. And for those listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. As a reminder, you can listen to our podcasts anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it be on Apple or Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, CastBox, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it be every single Sunday, sometimes on Thursdays, as well as a Fantasy Fair podcast, which drops either on Mondays or on Fridays. As a reminder, of course, to catch Kyle and Alexis on their review of Luca, and then Peter and I will be back here to discuss more In the Heights and Luca as well.
Why do you sound like a nighttime radio host?
Because it's 10:41 p.m. and I'm tired and I want to go. I'm done.
Good night.
Well, you could listen to this.
I'm exhausted. Okay. All right.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Stay under the spotlight. Bye.